Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Eerie News, Eerie.news, and today is June 6th. I'm sorry, June 8th. I'm a little bit behind the times here, or a little bit. 2025, Monday, June 8th, 2025. Incredible to think we are coming up on the mid year, halfway through 2025. June 21st, that's going to be the longest day of the year, and then supposedly from there it's all the way downhill till we go into fall and winter. So, yep. Well, let's get off to the first story out of Stranger Than Fiction Stories. And this is titled Marwood and the Animals. Could you be a hitman with a sense of humor? Apparently, there was one who worked for mobsters in Las Vegas. Rumors are that he would take snitches or those who knew too much on a one-way trip to the desert and give them a final resting place next to Spot and Kitty. What better place to hide a body than in the lonely desert around Las Vegas? Sitting in a flash flood area, no doubt some bones have been swept away into the gullies that pockmarked the land as the years have gone by. Coyotes and other animals have done their part to scatter bits of skeleton across across the nearby landscape. If police, joggers, hikers, or sightseers stumbled across a jumble of bones, most likely it would be assumed they belonged to Fido and not Frito. More than likely, this story is an urban legend, but who knows? When the cemetery was officially open, or officially established, was in 1964 on 15 acres. Las Vegas was already booming after World War II. By then, the ill-fated Bugsy Siegel had established the Flamingo Hotel, and millions thronged to the area to gamble and enjoy the shows. It's a spot of land about 4 miles south of Railroad Pass on Searchlight Highway, past Boulder City. Back in the 1950s, Boulder City had no veterinarians, so Marwood Dowd, who worked with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and sat on the Boulder City Advisory Council, doubled as the town's unofficial veterinarian. He loved animals and volunteered to help people with their pets and never charged for it. It's inevitable that Marwood couldn't save all of them. The heartbroken owners now needed a place to bury their animals and leave a sweet memorial to happier times. Dowd asked a friend, Emery Lockett, to help find a plot of land to use as a cemetery. They found a place close to the Boulder City Cemetery, but someone on the city council opposed it. The next choice was a spot off U.S. Highway 95, thought to be part of Boulder City. This didn't occur as expected and remained federal land. There are sources who say the land was used to bury animals as early as 1931 in an unofficial manner, which could possibly indicate why Dowd and Lockett decided on this spot as their second choice. Boulder City was a happening place in 1931 since it gave out its first marriage certificate for Ray Rutherford, 21, and Elsie Phillips, 16. It's not strange to think that pet owners would go out to the middle of nowhere to bury their beloved pets when all that was out there was desolate desert. First, the people came from Boulder City, but then, through word of mouth, others came from different parts of southern Nevada to bury their animals. Not only were there dogs and cats, but horses, snakes, lizards, fish, and donkeys are interred as well. Throughout the years, it's unofficially went by different names, such as the El Dorado Valley Pet Cemetery, the Marwood Dowd Cemetery, the Boulder City Pet Cemetery, and the Searchlight Pet Cemetery. Remember, this little boneyard existed on federal land. In other words, this is why these were unofficial names. There was no official on the map kind of deal. Emery Lockett, who acted as a caretaker, would charge to build coffins and erect fence posts. The cost for a small dog was $25 or $35 for a large dog. This would include picking up the remains, building the coffin, and burying the pet. There seemed to have been an increase of burials starting in 1965, possibly when word got out about Lockett's services. Only one quasi-famous pet is buried there. It's Flash, the son of Rin Tin Tin, who died in December 1966. For every marker that's still visible, untold ones have been erased by wind, sun, and sand. Flash floods and coyotes are another factor that have destroyed memorials through the years. Occasionally, the federal government squawked about the use of the land. but mostly ignored the presence of the graveyard, that is, until the 1990s. A decision was made to use this area as a tortoise habitat. This meant removing anything that was non native, and this most definitely included a pet cemetery. Concerned citizens made a deal with the government, and it was left as is. From this point on, it would be illegal to inter an animal there. Memorials, some simple, others more elaborate, poke between the boulders and sagebrush. Despite the warnings that no burials are permitted, there are those with dates as recent as 2015. A haunting connected to the cemetery is a sighting of a white cat that follows you around, but no doubt there are more that could be seen for those with eyes to see. Some of the memorials that the unforgiving sun and wind have spared read Kendall, Kenny Cat, February of 1987 to June 2012. I mean, there's various ones. There's some that date back to 1960. In other words, well, the animal was buried in 1969, but she was from 1961. Honey Hilton. Another one named Beast. Another one named just Killer. So, in other words, what happens is, I guess maybe, and it makes sense. Back then, like they said, in the 1930s, Boulder City, that's when they had their first marriage license given out, which means there was nothing and nobody out there. So it's not weird to think that people would go out to this little spot and bury their animals. Hey, where did you go? I went there. I went there. What? Next thing you know, you got this nice guy Marwood. He's like, okay, no vet. What do you need? Oh, your animal. Sometimes I'm sure, but it's more times than not. Maybe there was no way to save an animal, and it was like, well, oh my God, what do I do? Word got out. Hey, you want to bury them out there? And then Emery, okay, he's like, this guy's an entrepreneur. Yeah, I'm sure there were people that, in other words, that basically he was doing picking up the animal, making I guess a little coffin for it. And for those of you who are watching the video version of this is a picture from the 1960s that shows all these bunch of little picket fence, little areas, and some even have areas that are made of like iron. Like if you make like a little enclosure, there was various ones out there, and far off in the distance you can see the mountains. But again, this was the middle of nowhere. And then what happened, I believe that at some point, I think when Marwood was considering, I guess this piece of land was supposed to become part of Boulder City. It just never did. It stayed federal land. And then the tortoises arrived. Or not arrived, but they decided that the tortoises were more important than the deceased animals as far as that is concerned. So I guess they came to the agreement. No more burials, but again, this is the middle of nowhere. And now if you look at some of the pictures, a lot of the areas, a lot of these, remember, this is made of wood. A lot of the memorials, there's still some out there, but a lot of them have just they've been scattered around. And of course, it has a reputation for being haunted. But yeah, it's incredible. People, yeah, again, some people leave more lasting things like memorials. And then there's others that the truth is, even the owners die. Even anybody that wanted to go out there and maintain it, they're gone themselves. Okay, next story is also out of Stranger Than Fiction stories, and this is titled Remains of a Lost Party. The winds were savage, the cold penetrating just below the timberline near La Garita Mountains in Colorado. John C. Fremont looked at his camp where 34 men faced starvation. Their mules had frozen to death, all 120 of them. The expedition had tried to cross a 12,000-foot pass without success. The men struggled to the southeast side of the pass, but their provisions were gone. The trip was meant to find a railroad route from St. Louis to California. Funding for the expedition came not from the Army, but from his father-in-law, Missouri Senator Thomas Hart Benton. Okay, this is from Fremont's father-in-law. Fremont was no stranger to the terrain, so it wasn't inexperience that landed him in this predicament. By 1848, he'd crossed North America 3 times as leader of the Army Corps of Topographical Engineers and earned him the nickname Pathfinder in the process. Now, with the grim specter of death by starvation waiting patiently, he gathered 4 men led by Henry King, 25, and sent them south towards New Mexico, instructing them to find help at the first settlement they came across. 2 weeks crawled by and no help arrived. The January snows and frigid temperatures made life unbearable, and 10 more men died. Fremont decided to set out with a second party, with hopes the first party would arrive with the much needed food and provisions. However, on January 17, 1849, those hopes were dashed. They found the rescue party south of the San Luis Valley. The men were wild and emaciated, and only 3 of them were left. Fremont asked where Henry King was at, and the men pointed to a place a little way off. According to a book written by Fremont's father-in-law, there he found the dead man and horribly devoured. He had died of exhaustion, fatigue, and his comrades had fed upon him. This was 25 years before Alfred Packer, who came to be known as the Colorado Cannibal, ate of his party. Fremont took the remaining 3 men and continued toward New Mexico. They crossed paths with a Ute warrior who recognized Fremont from an earlier expedition. He invited the men to his camp, and there they were given food and horses. They reached Taos, and Fremont sought out his friend Kit Carson. They asked U.S. Army officials to send men, horses, and provision back to his men still stranded in the San Juan Mountains. Only 22 were left alive. The rest were found dead upon the road, scattered at intervals as each had sunk exhausted and frozen near campfires where they waited for death. The survivors were sent to Taos, where they found Fremont organizing a new expedition. The idea of finding a route through the Rocky Mountains at the 38th parallel was forgotten. Many asked why the expedition was lost despite Fremont's experience. In a letter dated January 27, 1849, which Fremont sent to his wife Jessie, he blamed the guide, Bill Williams. He hired the man at Bent's Fort because Kit Carson, who guided his earlier expeditions, was sick. According to Fremont, Williams seemed ignorant of the whole region they were passing through. Others, though, placed the blame at Fremont's door, saying he failed to take into consideration the warning given by the Indians and white traders that the snow was too deep and crossing the mountains was impossible. Letters written by Fremont himself told of the warnings he refused to heed. It seemed the party had missed the trail to the well-known Cochetopa Pass, but it would have been easy to do so if blinded by a blizzard, as the party had been. Instead, they wound up at a much higher elevation. As to the cannibalism, Fremont never mentioned it in any letters. However, he must have talked about it to his father-in-law, who included it in his book. He did mention it to men in another transcontinental expedition that lasted from 1853 to 1854 through the same area. He made the men swear they would never eat each other, even if they faced starvation. Members of that expedition wrote about the conversation. Fremont went on to become a senator representing California. In 1856, he ran against James Buchanan in a presidential race. During the Civil War, President Lincoln fired him as the general in charge of Western territories because he repeatedly ignored the president's orders. Fremont died in 1890 when he was 77. His life was marked by success, but losing a third of his men who resorted to cannibalism was something he wished the history books would forget. The following article appeared in the Colorado Chieftain dated October 29, 1869, which described the discovery of remains thought to be the Fremont party. Quote, between the Opal Fork of the Rio Grande and the Saguache on the high mountain west of the San Luis Park, a party of gentlemen found the bleached and decaying skeletons of 6 men stretched out on the ground, as if they had been undisturbed since death claimed them for their own. They were the skeletons of no less than 46 horses lying in the same locality. On examination of the spot, they found not less than 100 trees that had been cut down at a distance of 8 or 10 feet from the ground. The practiced eyes of a frontiersman could easily discern that the felling of the trees had been accomplished by white men. Searching the ground carefully, they found various fragments of articles, such as broken mustard pots and bottles, which confirmed the proof that they were among the relics of a party of their lost countrymen. upon whom cold exposure and starvation had done the work of death long years before. The lost adventurers had evidently been snowed in on their dreary march, as the tall stumps of the trees clearly indicated, and together they had faced the fury of the elements, prolonging life by feeding upon the frozen flesh of the animals until starvation and the pitiless blast of winter had overcome them, and death had given them a welcome relief from their appalling sufferings. The discovering party judged from appearance that 25 years had elapsed since the death of the explorers. End quote. It never goes on. It's one of the things that you always hear was, the party that went back, what, they didn't bury these men? Or were they buried, considering that there was only. Because remember, back then, unless it was some type of dangerous situation, it was always thought the right thing to do was to bury a human being, or what was left of them. So I guess not. So yeah, they and again, it makes you wonder, was it a question of that he chose the right person to take him, or did he just ignore the warning? Sometimes people, they become very full of themselves, especially if they've been successful before that, and they think that they're invincible, and guess what? The weather doesn't care who you are. So anyway, saying it's stranger than fiction stories, the next story is called Riding the Blue Buick. On a hot summer night, a blue vehicle glided along a narrow road known as the Old Spanish Trail. In the space of a few seconds, the quiet was rent as a screech of twisting metal reverberated, and 3 of 6 passengers in the automobile met a violent death. One of them was named Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield was born on April 19th, 1933. Her name then was Vera Jane Palmer, and she lived in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. Her father, Herbert, an attorney, died unexpectedly in 1936 when he was in his early 30s. As young as he was, he had already outlived 3 of his brothers. Elwood died in 1903, age 6. Floyd died in 1914 at age 21 from TB, and Walter in 1925, age 14, died from a heart condition brought on by a case of strep throat. Sadly, Herbert's parents outlived their 4 sons. That must be tough. Jane Mansfield's mother, Vera, married Harry L. Pierce. 13 years her junior, in 1939, the family moved to Dallas, Texas. Jane married Paul Mansfield on May 6, 1950, when she was 17 years old, and he was 21. On November 8, she gave birth to their daughter, Jane Marie. It seems the marriage was precipitated by a pregnancy. The couple moved to Camp Gordon, Georgia, while he trained in the Army Reserve. This was the same year that Vera Mansfield received an offer for a role in the B-movie Prehistoric Women. In 1951, she went to Austin, Texas, and worked as a nude model for art classes and other jobs to earn a living. Jane separated from Paul in January 1955, and soon after she modeled for Playboy. In 1976, her daughter Jane Marie was also featured in the magazine. It was at this point that she, as in Jane, caught the media's attention and broke into the film industry and Broadway. Her similarity in looks and style to Marilyn Monroe, who died in 1962, could not be denied. In November 1957, Jane bought a Spanish-style mansion at 10100 Sunset Boulevard in Holmby Hills. Her next-door neighbor was Tony Curtis, who lived at Alwood Estate. The bulk of the money to buy it came from an inheritance she received from her maternal grandfather, Elmer Palmer. The house dated back to 1929, when it was built as a honeymoon home for Rudy Valley, which he never occupied. He put it up for sale in 1936. In 1940, it was purchased by the Cantor family. Mr. Cantor was the head of the McDaniel grocery chain. In February 1958, an auction was held to sell the furnishings of the mansion where the family had lived for 17 years. The following month, Jane bought the house. It was after buying her dream home, which at one time was featured in Life magazine, that things seemed to go sideways for Jane Mansfield. That same year that Jane bought the house, she divorced Paul Mansfield after testifying that, quote, he wanted to turn into a kitchen slave, end quote. She then married Mr. Universe Miklos, or Mickey Hargitay. When Jane Mansfield moved in with Mickey Hargitay, the house was done over in pink from end to end, thus earning its name as the Pink Palace. There was a heart-shaped tub and a heart-shaped swimming pool with a 2-foot mosaic message, "I love you, Janie," inscribed at the bottom. Fans who toured by the estate would often be surprised when she would come out on the balcony and wave to them. In 1957, Jane Mansfield's pink Jaguar was destroyed in a fire at George Barris's custom car company. The following year, Mickey gifted her with a pink Cadillac, Eldorado Biarritz, convertible with tail fins for Christmas. This was the only pink Cadillac in Hollywood at the time. Soon, incidents started to occur which presaged the ultimate tragedy that was visited upon Jane Mansfield in June 1967. It started 9 years before, in October 1958, when Mickey Hartigay and then a pregnant Jane had a minor accident with an MTA bus that collided with her convertible. The damage was only to the bumper and estimated to be a mere $25 to repair. A few months later, in May 1959, Mickey Hartigay made the papers again, probably due to being Jane Mansfield's husband. The story reported out he was ordered to pay $300 per month to support his daughter Tina, age 9, born to his first wife Mary. That same year, a white Cadillac convertible owned by Hartigay was recovered in Firestone Park, several hours after it was reported stolen. 3 occupants of the car were arrested, but one of them claimed a cousin, whose name he couldn't remember, obtained permission from Hartigay to use the automobile. The white caddy seemed to have a certain allure because in August 1959, Baldwin McClinton, Jane's butler, was arrested for drunk driving while riding around in the car. The other person in the car, Charles Richardson, age 25, was arrested on outstanding traffic warrants and driving without a license. Jane and Mickey were out of town. This is hilarious. Hey, they're out of town. The butler and his friend take the caddy for a spin. Incredible. In October 1960, the IRS placed a tax lien on the property for unpaid taxes from 1957. August 1961, Perlman Baldwin, probably the Baldwin McClinton arrested in 1959, age 41, and Hattie Green, age 51, they were the butler and the maid for Jane Mansfield, suffered serious head injuries when they were struck head-on by a car driven by Elva Puckett, age 65, whose car spun in a circle on the San Bernardino freeway when the brakes locked. Mrs. Puckett died, and her husband, William, was seriously injured. May 1962, Jane calls a press conference where 40 newsmen and photographers showed up at the Pink Palace, where she told them she was calling off a divorce suit against Mickey Hartigay. Apparently, they had quarreled over her upcoming trip to Rome to film the movie Panic Button. However, it was a short-lived reconciliation since she signed a separation agreement in August. By Christmas, they were back together again. Strangely enough, during the intervening months, she announced she was going to marry Enrico Bomba, an Italian film producer. She told reporters, "Then all of a sudden it occurred to me that I wanted to reconcile with Mickey." The truth was that once she found out Enrico faced a long and expensive legal battle to obtain a divorce, Mickey seemed a safer bet. March 1963, Mickey Hartigay faced a $40,000 battery suit from Jane's hairstylist. He claimed that on February 21st, Mickey pulled him out of Miss Mansfield's auto and maliciously and wrongfully assaulted him. The car was parked in front of the stylist's apartment. Jane was supposedly dropping him off after they had gone out for dinner. Mickey denied the incident. 2 months later, the couple were divorced in Chihuahua, Mexico. She was pregnant with their 3rd child. By August 1964, Jane filed an injunction against Mickey. She wanted to restrain him from annoying and molesting her and their daughter and from entering their home to remove personal property. Jane had given birth to them to their 3rd child, Mariska. Their 2 boys, Miklos and Zoltan, stayed living with Jane. The following year, she tied the knot with Matt Simber, real name Thomas Vitale Ottaviano, and they had 1 child, Tony. In February 1965, the Pink Palace was attached by the Sheriff's Department. Jane and Matt Simber were sued for $382,000 along with General Artists Corporation. The suit involved breach of contract. The complaint stated that Jane had agreed to star in a movie being filmed in Turkey. The project had been scheduled for June of 1964, and she never showed up. The Pink Palace, for some reason, denied Jane marital bliss. By September of 1966, her relationship with Simber had soured, and a judge ordered him to return their 11-month-old son to her. Her alcoholism and infidelities ended the relationship, and she claimed extreme cruelty in her divorce suit against him. She then started to live with her divorce attorney, Sam Brody. He was associated with attorney Melvin Belly during the Jack Ruby murder trial in Texas. There were rumors it was an abusive relationship. During this time, Jane crossed paths with Anton Zanzer LaVey, born Howard Stanton LaVey, a high school dropout who joined the circus when he was 16. More of a provocateur than an actual Satanist, he denied all religions. He did, however, perform occult ceremonies to exalt his hedonistic belief system and get media attention. He established the Church of Satan, to which celebrities flocked. Sammy Davis Jr. attended an orgy party and eventually was given the title of Warlock II. Anton gained international attention during this time. Anton was smitten with Jane and invited her to be his high priestess. Whispers swirled that Jane had sought him out with a hope that he could place a curse against her last husband, Matt Cimber, with whom she was embroiled in a bitter divorce suit. Personal woes were on the horizon for the starlet. The rumors she drank heavily persisted, as well as relying on diet pills to keep her thin and dropping LSD. In October, the San Francisco Film Festival said she wasn't welcome. November 1966 was not a good month for Jane either. Sam Brody's wife added her name to a divorce suit she filed in the courts in February, alleging her husband had committed adultery with 40 women. Was Jane the 41st? Then her son Zoltan was mauled by a supposedly tame lion at Jungleland Zoo. The lion had been allowed to run freely for some publicity pictures Jane was posing for. Then it was chained because the handlers noticed it was acting peculiar. The boy had been playing close to the lion when suddenly the animal bit the child in the neck and inflicted serious wounds. Two employees of the zoo pried open the lion's jaws and had to pull him off the boy. 5 doctors, including 2 neurosurgeons, worked 3 hours on the boy. They said he had a skull fracture, a punctured spleen, and later contracted meningitis. Despite the alleged bitter divorce proceedings between them, on June 8, 1967, Jane was spotted at El Morocco with ex-husband Matt Cimber, dressed with very little to conceal. Jane maintained her relationship with Anton LaVey, and in 1967, they participated in a photo op. There was a debate as to whether Jane and LaVey had an intimate relationship. In a 1992 interview, LaVey's daughter claimed that Mansfield was a practicing Satanist and did indeed have an affair with her father. On June 19, 1967, newspapers published a story that Jane Mansfield's daughter was under police protection. The story detailed that Jane Marie had walked into the West Los Angeles police station and said she, quote, been beaten and whipped with a leather belt by a male friend of her mother, end quote. She displayed welts and bruises on her hips and mouth. Samuel Brody said police had no right to take the girl to juvenile hall. He used the fact that a judge had recently awarded custody of Tony, her 20-month-old son, with Matt Cimber to Jane in a custody dispute where he claimed she was an unfit mother. Due to Jane Marie's age, the judge kept details of the detention hearing secret. Jane Mansfield claimed she'd been having disciplinary problems with her daughter. A granduncle from the Mansfield family was given temporary custody of the girl. Later it was learned that Sam Brody was the one who administered the beating, and according to her daughter, Jane egged him on. On June 22, 1967, Sam Brody was involved in an auto accident where he ended up with a broken leg and bruised ribs. He was on his way to pick up Jane for a hearing about Jane Marie's custody. On June 29th, around 2:30 a.m., 18 days after Anton LaVey and Jane Mansfield were last photographed together, Jane, Sam Brody, and Ronnie Harrelson, their chauffeur, were killed when the Buick Electra they traveled in rammed the rear of a truck slowed by a cloud of mosquito fog across the highway. They were westbound on US 90, the waterway connection between the Gulf of Mexico and Lake Pontchartrain. 3 of her children, Mariska 3, Mickey 8, and Zoltan 6, were asleep in the back seat. They were injured and taken to the hospital. The driver of the truck was unhurt. According to police reports, the actress was decapitated. The group left Biloxi around midnight and were 30 miles east of downtown New Orleans, traveling on a 2-lane route known as Old Spanish Trail. Later, the cause of death for the 3 adults was listed as crushed skulls. Within a few days, there was a dispute over Jane's body and who would handle her funeral arrangements. A judge gave Mickey Hargitay and her mother custody of her remains based on his determination that Jane was never legally divorced from Hargitay. He said their Mexican divorce was not valid. Cimber, Jane's 3rd husband, was given court approval to administer her estate. The newspapers compared Jane's fate to other starlets who, quote, didn't live happily ever after, end quote. They cited Marie the Body McDonald, who died in 1965 from acute drug intoxication. Linda Darnell died in a fire in 1965. Marilyn Monroe committed suicide in 1962. Carol Landis took an overdose of sleeping pills in 1948. And Carol Lombard died in an airplane crash in 1942. On July 3rd, Jane was laid to rest close to her father in Fairview Cemetery located in Penn Argyl, Pennsylvania. Her paternal grandparents and great-grandparents were buried in the same cemetery. Of all her children, the only one who attended Jane's funeral was Jane Marie. The other four were under the age of 10. Brody's estranged wife was named special administrator of his $185,000 estate. It was disclosed that on May 30th, her dead husband had changed his will and named Jane Mansfield as his sole beneficiary. By this act, he disinherited his wife and two children, ages 3 and 9. The handwritten will was found in Jane Mansfield's safe deposit box. In the following days, there was a squabble to be named administrator of Jane's $800,000 estate. On July 31st, William Peake and his wife were appointed Jane Marie's guardians. He was Paul J. Mansfield's uncle. It's unknown why Paul, who remarried in 1957, was not given custody of his daughter. Amid the turmoil following Jane's death, those closest to her moved on and up, each making efforts to cash in on her death. 6 months after Jane's death in January 1968, Matt Cimber applied for a marriage license to marry a 23-year-old dress designer. Jane's former road manager, Greg Tyler, wrote a play about her life as he knew it. He was Matt's cousin. In April 1968, Maggie Hargitay married airline stewardess Ellen Ciano, age 25, in a Catholic ceremony. 400 guests attended the nuptials. Within less than a year after Jane was killed, both of her husbands had gone on to remarry. Despite their claims they still loved her when she died, both of them were intensely involved in lawsuits for damages in connection to her death. Soon after the first-year anniversary of the tragedy, Matt Cimber was running a bar called the Puss in Boots. He was hit with a misdemeanor count of exhibiting obscene matter for showing continuous films of women writhing on a bed. A judge dismissed the charge. He also provided facilities for sketching and photographing models on the premises. December 1967, the Pink Palace went on the market for $300,000. The 28-bedroom, 11-bathroom home with its 2.5 acres sold in August 1968, but only for $180,000 to an unnamed buyer. Included were 264 items of furniture and wardrobe belonging to Jane Mansfield. Jane's paintings and jewelry were not included and were to be sold at a court-conducted auction. Later in the month, a jewelry firm had already made a bid of over $50,000 for the items. It was around this time rumors circulated that Jane died due to a curse placed by Anton LaVey against Sam Brody, and also because of her involvement with satanic practices. Much of it was fed by LaVey himself, who claimed the accident came about due to rituals done against Jane's attorney. How much of it was true or a bit to grab attention for the satanic church is unknown. However, it was undeniable. Jane and her lover and an unlucky chauffeur died under horrific circumstances. Shortly after her death, a memorial service was held for Jane at the Church of Satan. During the ritual, bulbs started to flare up. Many attributed to the presence of Jane's spirit. Another story recounts where Jane's personal maid overheard her son Miklos speaking to someone when he was alone in his room. He told her, "I've been talking with Mommy. She comes here a lot to visit me." An unverified story concerns the 18-year-old son of a banker who was the first owner of the Pink Palace after Jane's death. He found a pink Honda given to Jane by the actor Nick Adams during a brief affair. Nick had been a close friend of James Dean, who found his own fiery death in a vehicle in 1955. Nick Adams died shortly after Jane in February 1968 under mysterious circumstances, which was termed accidental suicide. The teenager decided to take a spin in the car, and coming out the gates onto Sunset Boulevard, he died in an accident with an oncoming car. The family moved the same day. Then in the late 1960s, Ellen Naomi Cohen, a.k.a. Cass Elliot, moved into the house. She'd given birth to her daughter Owen in April 1967. She died from a heart attack in July 1974 in London. She was 32 years old. Mama Cass was another celebrity plagued by scandal. She abused drugs and alcohol, which led to the breakup of the Mamas and the Papas in 1971. She was involved with Pick Dawson, a drug smuggler who used her to gain entrance into celebrity circles in LA. It's believed it is connected to the Manson family murders. Bill Doyle, another boyfriend, was questioned by authorities about the murders on Cielo Drive as well. In 1967, Elliot was arrested in London. Initially, it was thought to be due to drug possession, and then for taking bed linens from a hotel without paying for them. In truth, the British police arrested her due to her involvement with Pig Dawson, who was under Interpol surveillance for drug smuggling as early as 1965, and wanted to question her about him. She was released without charge and left the courtroom munching on a hash cookie that she found in her handbag. Harry Pick Dawson, who was a heroin addict, died in 1986. An unsubstantiated story regarding ownership of Jane's Pink Palace was that another owner found a cache of Jane's clothing. She started to use them, dyed her hair light blonde, and accumulated even more Mansfield memorabilia. One night she heard what she assumed was Jane telling her to get out, which she did. Another owner of the Pink Palace was Ringo Starr. His efforts at denuding the home of its pinkness didn't seem to work, since the color would seep in through the white shade it was painted over with. Rita Greenland, another owner, said she would smell a woman's perfume, a scent not used by anyone living in the house. The inference was unmistakable. Was this Jane Mansfield's ghost still enjoying her palace? In 1976, Engelbert Humperdinck bought the house for $233,500, sight unseen. According to him, it was totally uncared for. Most of the pink was gone, but the famous heart-shaped pool was still there. He brought it back to its pink splendor and spent over $1 million to restore it. He did remove the swimming pool's message, since too many helicopters would hover overhead to capture the well-known connection to the blonde bombshell it had been dedicated to. Engelbert met Jane Mansfield years before, so he recognized her when he saw her ghost. He said, "Once I saw a figure in a long black dress in front of me. It was Jane, but it wasn't frightening. I was about to say, 'Hello, Jane,' when I realized she was dead. I didn't say anything, and then she faded out." He claimed to also smell her rose petal perfume inside the home. In 1980, he had the house blessed by a priest, and she was not seen again. He put it on the market in December 1989 for $8 million. By 1992, he dropped the price to $7.2 million, then changed his mind and took it off the market. In 1997, he offered the mansion on QVC. The price now was under $4 million. After living there for 26 years, he finally found buyers. He auctioned off the stained glass headboard, statuary, and other Mansfield artifacts. Jane's sons were allowed to take a petrified wood fireplace installed by their father, Mickey. Her daughter, Mariska, took a copper hood used over the fireplace of the pool house. Her father had engraved it with Janie, "My love will flame for you forever, Mickey." Engelbert kept a statue of Christ that topped a miniature Arc de Triomphe that graced the gardens. The new owners of the Pink Palace happened to be the then owner of Alwood Estate. According to Engelbert, they said their plans were to preserve it. Instead, they razed the house to enlarge Alwood's already large lot in 2002. In 2004, Engelbert Humperdinck said in an interview, "I used to smell her perfume. People are going to think I'm crazy if you write this. All houses are haunted. There are certain people who can feel the spirit. It's sad that the house was flattened. Where will Jane's ghost go now?" Other stories that circulated but were never verified is that the Pink Palace was plagued by bursting water pipes soon after Jane's death. Plumbers were scared off by moving objects. And a painter working in Jane's bedroom felt that someone was watching him, and once felt a touch on his shoulder. Moaning was heard. Servants came and went after only a few days. Linda Mudrick, Jane's longtime companion, quit, stating, "I never want to go in that house again." The source was supposed to be Jane's uneasy spirit, worried that her children would not receive her inheritance since she died intestate. May Mann, a columnist, told of several visits from Jane's ghost while she worked on the star's biography. The blue Buick Electra involved in the deadly accident was acquired by dearly departed Hollywood's Death Museum. The smashed and rusted artifact had faded, and brown streaks on the passenger door were described as Mansfield blood. In 2021, the museum had permanently closed. Due to the nature of the accident that killed Jane, the so-called Mansfield bar was developed. It's a bar that hangs from the rear of a tractor trailer used to catch a car's hood before it slides underneath the truck. So what do you think? Just bad luck? Hanging out with Anton LaVey? And one other because there's so many versions, rumors that Anton had warned her, stay away from Brody because I'm putting a curse on him, like anybody in the immediate area is gonna get it. Was it? Never know. Interesting, huh? All right. Uh let's go next story. This is an older story, but it's out of a Spirit Daily. It's titled Archdiocese Used Mystic and Haunted Case. It was an unusual circumstance, to be sure. Faced with an extraordinary, powerful haunting, the Diocese of Pittsburgh assigned a high ranking priest, who in his turn enlisted the help of an alleged Catholic mystic. The mystic, or intuitive as the priest, Father Ron Langwin, prefers to call her, was a local woman named Connie Valenti of Aspinwall, part of the Pittsburgh metropolitan area. She was involved, at least vicariously, in a famous case chronicled in a book called The Demon of Brownsville Road. By all accounts, a good, devout woman who had co-authored a column with Father Langwin in a diocesan newspaper for 25 years, Valenti, now 84, used paranormal skills to envision the interior of the house and view the spiritual presences there, and advised both Father Langwin and the homeowner, Robert Cranmer, on how to handle what can only be described as a nightmare. There is no doubt that on many occasions, Mrs. Valenti, who never visited the home, offered extraordinary, even amazing descriptions of rooms, furniture, and other characteristics. In some cases, her visions were virtually photographic. Parapsychologists called such an alleged ability remote viewing, while those in psychic circles call it clairvoyance. The curiosity is not only the deployment of an intuitive by the Archdiocese, but the advice Mrs. Valenti gave, including her instruction of Father Langwin, who was Vicar General of Pittsburgh, and as a priest has special power over evil, not to go to the home personally. Well known through a radio ministry, Father Ron Nauman Sr. would spend countless hours trying to help the homeowners, in some stretches speaking with Kramer every day. He told them it would be a long, perhaps years-long battle. Communicating indirectly through the priest for almost 2 years, Mrs. Valenti offered dozens, if not hundreds, of directives on how to fight what it became clear was a major demon. The demonic crisis was not resolved, however, until, after nearly 2 years, the Archdiocese did under Bishop Donald Wuerl, who would later head the Washington, D.C. Archdiocese, formally requested the assistance of a well-known New York exorcist named James LaBarre, who in one visit was able to dispel a vast proportion of the manifestations. Pittsburgh itself did not have an official exorcist, though it now does, as well as a peritus, or counselor, who is an expert in the rite. The homeowner himself finished the exorcism with prayers in a problem-plagued section of the basement. Years of battle, during which he tried everything from Mrs. Valenti's advice, in one case covering a mirror for unstated reasons, to playing endless loops of the movie The Passion of the Christ, had up to then proved frustrating, if not terrifying. The Archdiocese of Pittsburgh now has its own official exorcist, who is trained in Rome. In an interview, Father Langwin defended his use of Mrs. Valenti. I was largely a spokesman for a woman whom I believe to be a mystic, he told Spirit Daily, acknowledging that she had peculiarly instructed him never to go to the house itself. Yes, she advised that because I think if what was to be revealed was to be believed, then it should be by people who had never been in the house, in terms of what she was able to explain. So, never being in the house was a good thing. In the book it was said that the initial reason was that Mrs. Valenti thought the presence of Father Langwin would stir things up, worsen the situation. She has spiritual knowledge, says the priest. She is never public about it. She has never been given spiritual knowledge with which she helps people, things nobody knows about. She's able to go back and help people know the place God has in their lives. The question is whether involving a non-exorcistic mystic may have prolonged the episode, or even in effect fueled it instead of bringing about a resolution, as occurred when, after that period of nearly 2 years, sometimes with daily counseling by Father Lenguin and Mrs. Valenti, an actual exorcist finally visited the home. Other priests who did visit the home courageously battled the entity through repeated liturgies in the home. Surprisingly, Father Lenguin told Cranmer to expect an extremely long battle, in one case quoting the mystic as saying things would calm down for Christmas before ramping back up after the New Year. The question is whether that program matters in a less than productive way. The priest, now second in command of the Archdiocese, says Mrs. Valenti has helped police departments as well as countless individuals with her gift of spiritual knowledge. Even after the exorcism by Father Lebar, which occurred in 2004, Father Lenguin says he is not sure the house, which is being turned into a bed and breakfast, is totally clear. When you have a situation like that, he says there is the possibility that things can come back. There are places on earth that are more evil than others because, when they fell, the fallen angels went there, he adds. They can still have evil as energized by subsequent events. A further issue, reincarnation. Mrs. Valenti believes people have had previous lifetimes, says Father Lenguin, who describes it more as pre-incarnation, the existence of souls before coming to earth. We don't use the term reincarnation, he emphasizes. Indeed, the notion of reincarnation is formally rejected by the Catholic Church, as well as other Christian denominations. The priest says that while a person may come back in a different physical way, it's the same soul. We select what we want to do, what we need to do, coming into each life to learn more, to serve God better. Let's put it this way, souls going back to the Father to be renewed, says the vicar. I've had a hard time with this over the years, but let me say, if God says to go back to earth, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back. We select what we want to do, what we need to do, coming into each life. It's a matter of spiritual renewal. Mrs. Valenti declined comment. It's a controversial notion to say the least. When we were spiritual beings, we've always had to go back to the Father to be renewed spiritually, and that continued even when we took on a physical form. Even today, the soul goes back to be spiritually renewed. I've had a hard time with this over the years. We select what we want to do coming into each life to learn more, to serve God better. So strong was this infestation that religious objects were toyed with by unseen hands. Rosary beads were inexplicably wound into knots. Metal chains fell from the neck to the floor, though no links were broken. The crucifix on one set of beads looked like it had been chewed. Cranmer says he could sense this presence scurrying to other parts of a room when he used holy water, but the spirit would not leave. Okay, the reason why I included this, because this article dates back to 2019, is that, and you should check on Stories of the Supernatural. I'm shortly going to be interviewing Mr. Kramer, the owner of the Brownsville Road house, which, by the way, he does operate it now as a bed and breakfast. He still lives there. So, and that's how I came across this, which I thought was very interesting. So if you want to, sometime after, by the time you probably hear this, it should be out. If you want to see or listen to that interview, by all means. So until next time, take care.